Everybody, welcome back. I am so excited to have this next guy on the show, Jimmy Keefe. Now, this guy helped me tremendously when I was down in Shatterproof with FHE, and he's become a good friend of mine, and he currently works in FHE in the Shatterproof program, and Jimmy Keefe is here today. Welcome, brother. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Oh, man, I tell you, like I said, Jimmy, I mean, you were one of the instrumental people down there. You ran groups. You probably still do. You were like always there, making sure the Shatterproof team was, needed everything, and, all their needs were met. I mean, you're an amazing individual, brother. And you have a background. You were a former first responder. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, brother?
Well, as far as my first responder background goes, I was a firefighter in the city of New Brunswick, which is in New Jersey. Rutgers University, the State University of New Jersey, is located in New Brunswick. Also, Johnson & Johnson corporate headquarters is in New Brunswick. I grew up there my whole life. I lived there until I was 30. Then I moved down to the Jersey Shore. For my last 20 years, I was on the department, and I would commute up to New Brunswick to go to work. But I'm initially from New Brunswick. I was born and raised in that city. My grandfather was a attorney who had a law firm and became a judge. And Middlesex County Courthouse is also in New Brunswick. So my family was involved in with my grandfather being a judge. I had three uncles that were cops. My father and his first cousin were firemen. And at one point, I had 23 members of my family that worked for the city of New Brunswick, where I.
So if you ever had a problem, Jimmy, you just let me call let me get my Rolodex out and call somebody.
And then, to carry the tradition on, my oldest son is actually in his fourth year as a New Brunswick firefighter, and my third son's taking the test on December 3rd.
Awesome.
But how I got involved with peer coordination, I was really inspired personally by what happened to my father at the end of his firefighting career. He suffered from alcoholism and was an alcoholic my entire life, his entire life. And so he got in some trouble at the end of his career. In his 24th year, he showed up at work drunk, and they called him into office, and back then you didn't take a sick day for like 15, 18 years. So he had like 400 sick days in the bank, and he needed 180. And they ended up, the city that I worked for had my dad sign off on all this sick time, and they put him out in 24 years, but they gave him that extra year, but they got him for a year's worth of pay when he left. So that kind of motivated me to try to want to protect people, so that when they're running into problems and they're having issues, that they don't get taken advantage of. So that was the initial inspiration for me to be involved with my union. I served as a union president in my department for 12 years. Then I went from being a union president in a New Brunswick Fire Department, Local 17, to being a peer assistance coordinator for the New Jersey State FMBA, which is the firefighters union for the state of New Jersey. And so I had a state position, and I facilitated treatment for roughly 11 years. And 8 years into that, I went through a divorce, and I was having a really tough time. And, I was emotionally, I was having suicidal ideation, homicidal thoughts. And these thoughts took over, and I couldn't get them out of my head. And, after being a person who, encouraged people to go get help and get treatment for years and years and years, I found myself in a position as the guy that sends people to treatment, needing treatment myself. And, I said to myself that, I've been encouraging people for 8 years to get help when they need help. Now I need help, and I'm not going to get help.
Yeah.
So I actually, on October 19th of 2018, I called my peer rep, Tyrone Smith, that works with me, and he picked me up, and he actually flew me down to Shatterproof. And, I entered the program and went through the program myself. So I spent 48 days there as a patient. You know, I did all the neurostimulation, I did all, you know, the biobed, the breath therapy, the massage, the chiropractor, you know, the beach trips, and I really got to experience the community and the support that you get from each other when you were there. And it's such that, as you know, it's such a unique
Yeah.
community when you're sitting in a treatment center and there's 40 other guys that work in the field that you work in and see and experience the things that you see, and you're able to relate to each other. And that provided a level of comfort for me that I was able to trust and talk about everything that I needed to talk about in order to, you know, deal with what I was going through at the time. And what I was going through at the time was a divorce. I had been a single guy with full custody of 5 kids. And, you know, so I raised those kids from 2 different mothers basically by myself.
Wow.
And I had gotten married, you know, years and years into that. And so when I got married and I started going through the divorce, you know, I had to buy my wife out of a house that she didn't
Oh,
pay
yeah.
for. I had to, you know, I had, you know,
Financially
child
tough.
support.
Yeah.
I had to fight for what part of my pension I was going to keep. And while I was going through all that stuff, it was so overwhelming. And the thoughts just became unbearable. And I couldn't stop my mind from being hyper vigilant and trying to think out a million different processes of what to do. And, you know, when I first got to Shatterproof, I was literally, my nerves were so, I had thought that I'd gotten to the point that I was literally going to lose my mind. And
Mhm.
when I felt that shaky and that uncomfortable and that bad was when I finally said, you know what, I need to get some help. I need to go
Yeah.
down there myself. So I made the call. You know, I got flown down there by a guy that I'd worked with for years. And when I got to the program, the head of the program at the time was a lady named Annie Waymer, and she became my therapist. So I worked a lot one-on-one with her, and she did tons and tons and tons of work with me. You know, handouts on financial spending, handouts on sexual narcissism, you know, sex addiction, gambling, like every possible thing that I can look at that I might have possibly had a problem with and was contributing to my condition was dealt with when I was there.
Yeah.
And, you know, so in that time, you know, I walked in the door and I was so bad when I got there. And like yourself, you know, when you leave, I was in so much of a better condition that I made peace with the fact that I was getting divorced. I made peace with the
Yeah.
fact that I had to sell my house. I made peace with the fact that I needed to step down from being a union president at my job because of the amount of hours and time and, you know, the other commitments I had. I was coaching football. I was a union president. I was a peer coordinator. And I had so much stuff on my plate that I had forgotten, you know, about myself. And I was walking through life and taking care of all these responsibilities and
Absolutely. Yeah.
doing all these things. And I was doing absolutely nothing for my mental health, for myself. All hobbies and fun things I had, you know, loved and enjoyed when I was younger, like athletics, working out, going to the beach, riding motorcycles, playing basketball, like anything that brought me joy and enjoyment. I didn't do any of it anymore. So
Yeah.
I'd gotten to the point where I was just going through the regimen of life. And, you know, with all my kids and all my responsibilities, you know, this game this weekend, this game that day, I had just gotten so overwhelmed with life that like I didn't exist in my own life
Yeah.
anymore. So when I was down there, I was able to take a look at just the mass amount of responsibility and things that I had to do. And you know, while I was there, I really made a decision to make, you know, some extreme changes. I made the decision to definitely get divorced. I made the decision to sell my house. I made the decision to get divorced, sell my house, step down as the union president. One thing that I wanted to stay involved in because I knew it'd be great for my recovery was the peer assistance
Hmm.
coordinating that I was doing for the state FMBA and helping people. And, you know, so I stepped away from the coaching, the union president, all the other things that were going on. And then I stayed and dedicated myself into the peer coordination and assisting others that were going through what I went through. And, it inspired me because I was helping other people. And it was very similar to the feeling that I got when I was a firefighter and going through the front door and putting a
Yeah.
fire out and saving somebody's house that didn't burn to the ground, and getting people out that might have been trapped in the building. And you have such a feeling of fulfillment because you're helping
Yeah.
as a first responder. And I got that same feeling from helping other people. And I knew I was getting up in age. I was, in my 24th year in the fire department. I only needed one more year to make pension. I ended up staying through 27 years, and then retiring February of 2021 to work full time down in
Yeah.
Shatterproof, which I started March 2nd, a month after I retired. I ended up moving down to Florida and starting. But, the reason, there was a lot of personal reasons why I got involved in the first place. My father's situation. So what ended up happening to my father is he went to see my brother's newborn baby in the hospital, and he was drunk, and my brother told him, "You'll never touch my child in the condition you're in." And he was so upset by that that my father went home and tried to detox himself in his living room.
Oh,
So 4 days later, I found him, and he had a stroke, and he had major brain damage, and he spent the last 10 years of his life in a place called the New Jersey State Fireman's Home, which is a nursing home that's federally funded for anybody who has served as a firefighter in the state of New Jersey. So my dad, what happened with him, how he left the job 2 years later, ending up in a nursing home. So for 10 years he was in that nursing home, and I'm
yeah.
bringing my kids to see my father, and he can't remember my kids' names.
Oh,
He's asking me the same questions over and over the whole time we were there. The funny thing about it is, when he went into the nursing home, I had 3 kids, and then I had 2 more kids, and I would bring the 5 kids to the nursing home to see my dad, and he would just look at all the kids and go, "Are all these kids yours?" But because he had brain
yeah.
damage from the
Yeah.
stroke, he would look at me like every 3 minutes and ask that
It's,
same question.
yeah.
So he'd
Yeah.
ask me that question 40 times
Yeah.
when I was there. And he had his room, and the people at that nursing home were great. And they took
Yeah.
it, it was probably the cleanest nursing home I've ever been in my life. And they really do a good job of, like, helping the guys that need to be in there in the condition they're in. And it was just really sad to
Yeah.
me that, like, the matriarch of my family, sitting in the jerry chair outside the nurse's station, he doesn't even know where he is.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, when we're going through what we go through, and there's drinking and addiction and gambling and everything that can cause us problems, we always think, well, who's it going to hurt if I die? Or who's it going to hurt
Oh,
if this, I'm
hurts
only
everybody
hurting
around you.
myself. But everybody around you gets hurt, and everybody gets affected. And you know, because of that, what happened with him, I wanted to break the pattern of those type of things and make sure that that didn't happen to me, and that my kids didn't have to bring my
Yeah.
grandchildren to me while I'm sitting in their nursing home and don't know who they are. So
Yeah.
I had a real lot of personal motivation. I mean, my first wife ended up, we were together I had 3 kids. They were 6, 4, and 2. I was married for 7 years. We got divorced, and she, drank and did certain things, and then she ended up getting hooked on opiates and becoming an opiate addicted addict, and basically abandoned my first 3 children, her children, and hasn't, in the last 23 years, that from when that happened to now, she's probably seen them 5 of 23 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So addiction, alcoholism, PTSD, everything has so influenced my life. And going back to everything began as a child. So when I was a child, in the house that I grew up in was very abusive. Father was physically abusive to my mother, was physically abusive to me and my brother, mentally abusive. He was the drunk guy that told the same story at the kitchen table
Sure.
half the night, hitting his fist on the table. And you know, all that type of stuff till when it escalated to actual violence. I seen my mother bloodied 15 to 20 times in my life, you know, ambulance taking her to the hospital. We moved with my grandfather for a year. So there was so much early childhood trauma, you know, that I was affected by, that really put me in a position where I viewed myself as less than other kids. You know, my
Hmm.
mom was mentally ill. You know, she went to the bathroom on herself. She didn't pay attention. She, you know, talked out of turn and didn't say the right things. And, you
Hmm.
know, as a kid, I was embarrassed by that. And
Sure.
then dad shows up and he's drunk and you're doubly embarrassed. So
Hmm.
you go through your whole childhood thinking there's something wrong, you know. Why am I in this situation? Why is this happening to me? So you feel a certain way about yourself and you bring that into your adult life. And as much as, you know, we want to like change our path and do something different, you know, I ended up trying to have the perfect family and be the perfect father and do the perfect thing. So my kids didn't have any kind of experiences like I did as a child. So
Sure.
my childhood was always on my mind, always in
Yeah.
my head, always a part of it. And it was the trauma that was involved in that. So that's one type of trauma. And then when I became a firefighter, I was on the job for 9 months. And in my ninth month, we had a fire with victims trapped. And I found a 5-year-old girl trapped in an upstairs bedroom. That she was playing with matches with her two siblings, and the matches caught her nightgown on fire because it wasn't made with fire retardant material. Because this is, you know, 25 years ago,
Sure.
and so she ended up catching on fire. And I found her in the back room, and she had 72% third-degree burn. She had burnt 9 of her 10 fingers off. Half of her face was burnt off. And when I found her, I was in complete blacked out, smoke to the floor, got her down the steps. And when I handed her off to EMS, she was smothering and her skin was completely stuck and falling off on my turnout gear. I was a 23-year-old kid with a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old son at home. And I had, you know, found this girl. And
Hmm.
when I went through that experience, you know, they don't teach you in the
Yeah.
academy when you go to the academy that, you know, you're going to find somebody, they're going to be hurt real bad. You're going to feel bad about it. You know, the thought is that, hey, I'm going to make a save in a fire. I'll be a hero. I'll get a
Yeah.
medal. I'll feel great about myself. I'm this wonderful, great fireman. And my experience was that when I went through that situation, I didn't feel like a wonderful, great fireman. I didn't feel like a good guy. I felt that I found her in the fire and I condemned her to a lifetime of doom. You
Yeah.
know, she was in New Jersey, the burn center that is the #1 rated burn center that anybody uses for any severe burns is St. Barnabas Burn Center in North Jersey. And so this child that I found went to that burn center and was there for 21 months getting skin grafts and stuff. So when that happened, you know, I looked at what I had done as something very bad. I condemned her to a life of doom. And from that moment to 4 years later, drinking quadrupled, drug use quadrupled, you know, spending, being completely out of control. And it was something that had completely taken over, like having dreams, picturing it,
Hmm.
flashbacks to it, always feeling like shit, always, you know, so I had a real lot of self-blame. And then I, you know, was suffering from the God complex. Like I could have did something to make
Sure.
this
Sure.
scenario
Could have
not
saved her.
happen
Yeah. Yeah.
and save her, do something better. And so when I had experienced and went through that, it gave me a lot of insight into, you know, the differences in trauma. There's can be a traumatic event that affects you in a certain way that instantly changes your life, or it could be over a period of time of years and years and years, experiencing certain behaviors and things that happen in your home that, you know, affect you for the rest of your life. You
Yeah.
know, like, you know, from today with all this stuff, you know, I was in a therapy session about a week and a half ago, and going through some stuff, and the therapist had asked me, have you ever named your inner child? Because a lot of times today things will come up and I'll have a behavior and I'll act in a certain way and I have no clue where it's coming from, and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Am I am I going crazy or
Yeah.
something? But what it ends up always being is a defect and a shortcoming and something that I'm acting out on. And it always leads back to that little kid that felt he wasn't good enough. And why am I in this situation? And what's wrong with me? And I'm hurt. It's traumatic memory from
Yeah.
childhood, from being on the job. And I think this affects a lot of us
Absolutely.
throughout our whole life, where we end up in a difficult situation or something that's outside of your normal everyday basic generic stuff that you do, and it's a problem or something where you have to make a decision and it's going to affect you personally. And that's when I find myself going back to being immature, being short-tempered,
But at
saying
least you
something
could, but at
stupid.
least you can recognize it, Jimmy.
I'm starting,
Yeah.
4 years after being treatment and hundreds of meetings, therapy
Yeah.
sessions,
Yeah.
everything else. Over time, I'm getting to the point where at least I can identify this.
Exactly.
When I get a flip in my stomach, I know that means something's wrong, and I have to address something's going on. It never comes from my head in my clear. It's not a smart thing. It's a feeling. It's a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
And when your stomach starts flipping, that's when I recognize myself getting back to being that hurt little kid again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which today is healed 1,000 times more than 4 years ago or 20 years ago, because like you said, a big part of it is being able to identify what you're doing and why, and to understand the emotions and feelings and identify the emotion and call it for what it is.
Yeah.
I feel unsafe because of this, you know what I mean? And being able to identify why you're feeling unsafe or what's going on with you, what the feeling is. And is it valid, or is it just a trauma memory that you're acting in a certain way because of something that's happened in your past that
Yeah.
may affect you your whole life? But the key to it, I feel, is being able to recognize and see when these
Absolutely.
things are happening and understand these feelings are coming up. And, like we said, when we were down in treatment, a group is much stronger than one person by himself. And that's why, the Shatterproof program works so well, because it's such a big group of guys and everybody's in support of each other. And, when you leave Shatterproof, how do you continue that? How do you, keep it going? How do you build your camp so that you can be protected with all the people that are there to protect you? And it's, you know, when you feel yourself getting into the crazy, or the crazy coming into your head, and you're not thinking rationally, the key to that is talking to somebody else and
Absolutely.
telling on yourself and letting
I'm
somebody know what's going
I'm
on, and
still
then you're good.
I'm still in contact with people I was in treatment with, Jimmy. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people do, that down at
Oh
Shatterproof,
yeah.
they exchange information, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm still
Yeah.
in contact with like 15 people that I was in treatment with.
Nice.
And
No, it's funny that you say that, because I still talk to 5 guys from 4
yes.
years ago that I was at Shatterproof with, and 2 were in FHE Health and weren't even Shatterproof guys. This guy Dave and this guy
Yeah.
Mike that I just made friends with when I was down there. Then I have a guy Scott, Anthony, and Big Anthony that I talk to all the time, and those are 5 guys I probably talk to once every couple of weeks. You know what I mean?
But
And stay in touch, and it's helpful.
yeah, and you said it. There's strength in a group. Look, I tell people you're
Oh
not
yeah.
an island. You're not an
No.
island. I mean, you can't do it alone. Or you can try.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can try to do it alone,
Yeah,
like we all try
usually
to
it
do.
doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And what do you think, Jimmy? You were a fireman. You were in the first responder field for a long time. I mean, do you think we're getting better in the first responder community? I know it's kind
I
of a broad question, with
I
coming
well,
forward and
I
saying, "Look, I need help."
definitely think we're getting better. I think we were in a position where we were just very awful and bad at offering people help. And I think one of the part of that problem is that, we get stuck in don't be a rat.
Yeah.
Don't tell on this. You better take care of this guy. He's your brother. Watch his back. But in doing that, we're supposed to watch their back in a healthy way. And sometimes watching somebody's back is when you see them in trouble, identifying they're in trouble and confronting it. And I think in the first responder community, we don't confront each other because it's something that's uncomfortable to us.
Sign of weakness.
Yeah, sign of weakness, this and that. And in my department, in New Brunswick Fire Department in New Jersey, I spent 27 years as a firefighter there. I had 9 active duty firefighters, chief, captain, firefighter, it didn't matter what rank it was, that died as a direct result of drinking and using drugs. So over my career, that's one guy every 3 years, and it was a 100-man department.
Wow.
10% of the guys I worked with in my 27-year career were dead. You know what I mean? And until the end, so the last like 3 or 4 years of my career, we had a guy die on a cocaine overdose. He, had a heart attack. And then we had another guy die from opiates, from stopping his heart from taking the opiates. And these 2 guys died within a 9-month period of time. And they were like number 7 and number 8 that died in the life of my career. And at that point, with moms crying and kids crying at funerals and repasses and, department funeral for an active member, the guys started really taking a look at that these 2 guys, most likely that may not have been their fate if they were confronted when we first found out about the problem, but they had spent years and years and years, coming late to work, having a guy cover for an hour and a half because they were late because they're hungover, or, and we do all these things to help our brother out, but in the end, we're really not helping our brother out. And both of these guys that died from, the cocaine and the opiates could have maybe lived if they lost their job 3 years earlier.
Yeah.
And that's a fact that we don't want to look at because, in our community, with our unions, with our protections and the things we do, we're very protective and very protective over each other. But sometimes we're so protective and we're trying to help people so much that we're absolutely hurting
it's a
them.
detriment. Yeah.
And when it comes to alcoholism and addiction and things like that, if you enable a guy to keep a very well-paying job that is doing a lot of heavy drugs, you're going to kill him. And I think in our industry, we haven't drawn the line in the sand yet. We haven't made our mark and said, you do this, that's crossing that line. We have to address it. You have to go to treatment.
Absolutely.
There is no ifs, ands, or buts. And I don't think people are confronted because of the family closeness, the department barbecue, the department Christmas party, department Halloween party, the retirement dinners. Like, we become so closely knitted in my department. Everybody that retired had a dinner every year. We did a barbecue. Every Christmas we had a big Christmas party, and everybody was very friendly with each other. And they're like almost like not another employee, like a best friend.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at a best friend, you're not going to get him in trouble at work and get him suspended 2 weeks without pay and not be able to pay his mortgage this month. And we're worried about those things instead of saving lives. And there's a certain line in the sand that, we have to figure out where to paint that line with people. And when is too much too much? When do you confront somebody? When do you say something? And usually they say, if your addiction and your alcoholism and your depression or your PTSD is showing up at work, it's been a problem for 2 years. So by the time it shows up at work, it's been a problem for a while already. And I think people aren't educated to understand these, true signs of somebody really being in trouble. And when they show up at work, or they come into work and they're reeking like alcohol and they're, sniffling and blowing their nose all day because they're cranking down lines the night before.
Yeah.
To think that this stuff it's part of America, like drugs, alcohol, the party is all part of, what Americans do more than any other country in the world. So for us to, be ignorant and say it doesn't exist and don't have a plan to deal with when somebody has a problem with it is the biggest part of the problem.
But we can't sustain this.
No.
No, we
Absolutely
can't
not. No,
keep going down. You know the stats,
no.
Jimmy. Like what,
Oh, absolutely.
40% or something first responders are suffering from
Oh, yeah.
mental
Yeah.
health
It's
addiction.
well,
And that's the number we
yeah.
know about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they say the first responder community is 3 times worse than your general population community or somebody that's in a 9 to 5 job Monday through Friday in a cubicle, because they're not seeing what we see. We see more death, more strife, more problems in 1 year than most people see in a lifetime. And because of that, we're 3 times as likely. So the national average is 7% of the population has a problem with drugs and alcohol. In the first responder community, it's 21% have an absolute problem. And then if you look at, the population that would be drinking and recreationally using drugs and stuff like that, that's when we get up into the 40 to 50% of all of the departments. Everything's a drinking event, everything's a meetup at a bar after a shift to deal with a tough call. Everything is centered in that environment once we're off of work. What do we do when we leave the firehouse after a bad fire? We go to the bar the next day. We had a fire, we go have drinks. And that's how you deal with things, and it's a big part of our community. But it's something that is getting better, and I do believe that there is a lot of awareness on what's happening due to the death. I think because we're shocked enough when we deal with death at work, and then when we start dealing with death at work and it's our coworkers, it's really starting to light a fire under some people's asses to start doing something and have a protocol in place on how to deal with these issues and problems.
Yeah. And the one thing I liked when I was down in treatment, Jimmy, you know this.
Yeah.
And a lot of people listening. I mean, when I was in treatment, it was like, okay, I'm in my bubble. Okay, I got Jimmy there. I got everybody. Everything's going good. I'm getting the treatment I need. But the minute I left treatment, I was like, oh fuck.
Oh, that's when the work begins.
that's when the real work begins.
Absolutely.
Because you're in,
when you're in treatment, you're in a protected environment.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have the group and everybody's there to protect you. There's no alcohol there. There's no guy lighting a joint, stepping outside of the bar where you're eating a sandwich. Like, you don't have to, there's no wife yelling at you, how come you didn't do the laundry? Why are you home late for dinner? Change the baby. Like, all of that stuff is not happening when you're in treatment. And everything is about you getting healed and as healthy as possible, so that when you do leave, you can deal with these difficult things that we deal with in our daily lives, like kids, work, being on time, taking care of laundry, cooking dinners, cleaning the house. Like, there's all these things that are responsibilities that heighten whether we're going to be able to make it or not. It peaks it. So I always say to everybody when the guys are leaving or about to discharge, this is where the rubber hits the road.
This is your foundation you got here.
You were protected here. We gave you some tools. We told you what to do. 12-step meetings, therapy, IOP, your next phase of treatment, what you're going to do and what your plan is. And if you don't have a plan when you're leaving, you're most likely you're coming back if you're lucky enough to make it back. You know what I mean? So I try to stress that to have a plan and to make sure you have some good people in your corner that you could reach out to that'll answer the phone for you. And some people keep it very slim and like get a sponsor and a support group and go to AA and do this. And I think it's even more than that. Call your mother, call your brother, a sister you're close with, a friend that you grew up with your whole life. That's a great, like, we don't just have to cornhole ourselves into one little corner of help. We can actually, when we learn that our answer is to have more people in your life, have more opinions, bounce things off more people, that, and we learn to reach out and start talking and doing the things that are going to allow us to become healthy. Because, sometimes I think I'm absolutely right. And that's when I'm the most dangerous to myself. Because if I'm right, I'll be right to the point till I'm wrong.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I'm so right that I'll argue with my rightness to the point where now I'll be disagreeable and I'll say something, and something that I may have been right about, now I'm absolutely wrong because what I did is 10 times worse than what we were even talking about.
Yeah,
So like with me, I have to pay attention to things like that, like, remaining humble, putting myself in a
absolutely.
position of, being honest, being open-minded to listen to other people, being open-minded to when you think you're right about something, don't argue and fight about it.
Yeah,
Just, learn to that you don't have control over other people. And, like one of
absolutely.
my big things I used to always say is like understanding our powerlessness empowers us to make decisions over what we have control of, and it's our actions. If I'm trying to control everybody around me, my wife has to do this, my child has to do that. The guy at work, I told him to do this. Why isn't this happening? And I'm driving myself absolutely cuckoo. But if I, stay focused on what I have control over, which is me, it
Yeah,
allows me to empower myself because I actually can make decisions for myself
yeah,
and I do
exactly.
have control over what I'm going to do in the situation. And
Yeah.
that one was huge for me with my kids. I have 7 kids. I have a daughter that was in the thralls of addiction who has 15 months clean right now.
Yeah, that's
She did
awesome.
treatment for 3 months. She's been in the sober house for 12 months. And with her was the biggest example for me because the things she was doing were threatening her life. So in that scenario, what can I do about that? I can't watch her. I can't lock her to the chain her to the bathroom sink or keep her in the house 24/7. And I had to learn to do what I'm going to do in a scenario, and I have to let her be who she's going to be
Sure.
and learn her lessons, through herself. And she eventually learned, but I did have some control over. I knew what she was doing with the drug use and this and that, and I notified the narcotics task force of the town I lived in, and the guy that was on the force coached football with me, and I let him know because it was, and that's one of the things like I talk about with the guys, like when are we going to confront somebody when they're going down the toilet bowl and they're about to be flushed down the toilet? Are we going to confront them or are we never going to say anything?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So in the situation with my daughter, I had to, make a decision to do what I felt was right, regardless of the consequences to
absolutely.
her, because I did have control over what I was going to do in a scenario, not her. So I made a decision, I
Yeah.
informed on her, and she got arrested and it saved her life. You know what
Well,
I
and
mean?
I always used to
But
tell my
yeah,
kids, Jimmy, I always used to tell my kids, look, I love you. I
yeah.
love you more than anything and do anything for you. But I'm not here to be your friend.
Oh
I'm here
no,
to be your
no, no, no.
parent.
Yeah,
I'm here to be your
absolutely. Yeah.
parent first. Hopefully we can be friends.
Yes,
But I think that's the
absolutely.
problem with some parents is they want to be the cool parent. You know what I mean? They don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
they don't want
yeah.
to they don't make any hard decisions.
Well, that's the thing too. What recovery teaches us, there are certain hard decisions in life that we're going to have to make, and it allows us to make the decisions based on what we feel is right due to living a spiritual life and trying to do the
Mm.
right things and be a good person and be honest and willing and helpful and humble. And when you start doing those things and you make the right decisions, you'll do what's right in a tough situation. And being in recovery has afforded me the ability to do that. Where in the past, I felt too insecure about myself and what was going on. If I'm drinking, I'm smoking pot, I'm doing this, and I'm sneaky, and I'm not supposed to do it. And how the hell am I gonna, tell one of my kids what they
Yeah.
should be doing or direct
Yeah.
them in the
Well,
right way if
it's
I'm doing
hypocrite.
those things?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
hypocritical. I remember when I
yeah.
was down at Shatterproof, brother. I don't know if I told you when I was down there, but the times I've been down there, we've talked. But I remember it was about 2 weeks into treatment. I was doing good. I was feeling good. And a buddy of mine I used to
Uh-huh.
work with, good friend of mine, called me up
Mhm.
in my last agency I retired from, and he said, "Hey, man, how you doing?" "I'm doing great." He was like, "Look, a lot of your friends here, they know something's going on with you. I mean, because I told him where I was at.
Yeah,
He was
yeah,
a good friend of mine. And
yeah,
he didn't say anything, but he said, a lot of friends are asking where you're at. Do you mind if I tell you? And I said, absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. I'm not, to your point, I'm not
yeah,
ashamed anymore. I'm not afraid anymore. I put my ego
yeah.
aside. Now, if you would have asked me a year prior to that, I would have been like, hell no, don't tell
I'm
anybody
not telling
anything.
anybody. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I got to a point, Jimmy, where I was like, screw it. I don't give a shit what
Yeah.
people think. They're going to judge me. I'm doing this for me. And the one
Well,
thing that treatment taught me among many other things, was I have to be very selfish.
Oh, absolutely. You
Not a
do. Yeah.
narcissist or not ignoring my family, but selfish in a point where I need to look at myself first and take
Yes.
care of myself so I can be better for other people.
Absolutely. And pain is always a great motivator. And
Yeah, absolutely.
what happens to us is we find ourselves in so much pain that our answers aren't our answers anymore. And it forces us to be open-minded and maybe look at what somebody else has to say to help us. And, when I was in treatment, also, I was in a very similar situation that what you just explained with your friend, with all of the members of my union. I mean, I was representing 104 guys and all their
Yeah.
contracts and their raises and this and that. And, when I had come home from treatment, and the very next union meeting we had, I stepped down as the president, and I explained to my local, listen, I'm going through a divorce. My kids are having a tough time. There's a real lot of troubled areas that I need to deal with in my life, and I need to step away from doing this. And the two things that helped me with was I was cutting down the level of responsibility that I had to other people, and I was being responsible to myself.
Absolutely.
And I was, being responsible to not only myself, to my recovery, my family, the things that I needed to do by stepping away from some of these. And, being the union president is very ego building. So for me, what is ego? Ego is edging God out. If I'm
Yeah.
in ego and I'm worried about what you think about me, and for 12 years, I'm doing contracts. Anybody's got a problem at work, they're coming to me. We're doing conventions. People are buying you dinner, and it feeds your ego and builds your ego to a place. But I needed to step away from that job because I needed to get out of ego in living according to thinking I'm somebody because I'm doing this, and humbling myself. So for me, that was a huge thing for me, was to start dealing with that ego and, people pleasing and doing everything I can for others, and to start doing some things for myself, man,
And help and doing what you're doing now, brother. You're helping so many
Absolutely.
people, man. I mean,
Absolutely.
you're helping so many people, Jimmy.
Thank
And
you. Appreciate it.
I am blessed to call you a friend, and
Me, I feel the same way, buddy. I'm
you
blessed to
know,
call you a friend also.
yeah, and I love and tell us really quick. Now you're down at Shatterproof, but you recently are doing something different now. What's your new title, brother?
Oh, I'm the senior resident manager for the Shatterproof program. So I'm managing the community and like activities, beach trips, barbecues, anything that's
Absolutely.
outside of the group setting where the therapy's happening. What happens after the therapy is what I do there. And
That's awesome.
it's from being somebody that was in the community, I could relate to the community and what they're going through, because I sat in their chairs, I did the neuro, I did the therapy, I did the treatment, and it helped my life immensely. So most of what I do is just share how helpful it was for me, and
Absolutely.
how much it changed my life and how it could change their life, and just try to be a beacon of light or an example of somebody that was in their position that came out the other side. And if that's all I do for anybody that's there, that's enough for me, man.
Yeah.
That's enough for me. But it's very humbling to work there, and it's it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of emotion. I mean, we're dealing with people that are going through the worst times of their entire life. And then they show up, and, every day that you go there, you can't be, short tempered.
No.
You can't argue back with somebody. You have to be there to care for them. And, by putting myself in that position and doing that, it really helps me in my life and my recovery. So by helping others, it just makes me feel so much better about myself, and makes my decisions and the things that I do in my life easier, because I feel better about myself and who I am and what
Absolutely.
my purpose is today, so it makes
Absolutely.
things cool. I
Absolutely.
recently got engaged too, buddy.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah,
heard that. I think I heard that.
yes, I got engaged August
Well,
19th to my beautiful
congratulations.
fiance. And that's like another thing. 4 years ago when I came through the program, I was going through a horrible divorce. I was like, I'll never be married again. I'll never do this. I'll
Yeah,
never
yeah,
do
yeah.
that. But I hadn't done any work on myself.
Exactly.
And, you know, one of the things I was taught by my therapist when I was down there was to, you know, I had to really look at my patterns and what I was doing in my intimate relationships with women, and where were my mistakes made? What do I need to address? And a big thing that was told to me was to make sure, because I had 7 kids with 3 different women. I
Mhm.
could not, you know, meet the 4th woman that I'm going to have 2 more kids with and make all the same mistakes and the people that I was picking. So when I did the work and I started looking at my patterns and the things that I do and the people that I was picking and why, it led right back to that hurt little child that
Yeah,
didn't feel good enough.
absolutely.
So, you know, I pick people with problems, um, no car insurance, no medical benefits, never went to school, this, and I'm going to save them. And if I save them, they're going to love me. But the people I was picking didn't care about themselves, because if they did, they would have had their life a little more together and I
Gotta love
wouldn't have
your,
had to save them.
gotta
So
love
because,
yourself.
yeah, so I didn't love myself enough to pick somebody to be with and to trust that was worthy of my trust. I picked people that, were problematic and had issues and
But we
problems and
all,
this
we
and
all
that.
do. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So for me, you know, when I worked with my therapist and my counselor and I was going through this divorce and everything, and I was looking at all these issues, I made a decision to be alone for minimum of 1 year, maximum of 2 years before I'm even going to go out on a date. I made it 22 months before I went on my first
Well,
date.
that's good.
But when I took that time to really do some work on myself and really concentrate on my relationship with my belief in God, my relationship with my children, work, what my responsibilities, everything that was going on in my life, and I prioritized me in my life, and I didn't start chasing, finding the next one, because for me, that could be as bad as being addicted to a drug or an alcohol,
Absolutely.
sex, women. I got to have the next one, and I had to address that because that was so much of a problem for me as drinking was. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Well, what do they
So
say? What do they say? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same stuff over and
making
over
the
again,
same mistakes, expecting a
a
different
different
result.
result.
Yeah,
So, I
and you
mean, and
always get
that's,
the same
yeah.
result.
And that's the
Yeah,
one thing that I learned in treatment too. And yeah,
yeah,
brother, I'm so happy you're doing good. And
yeah.
I thank you
Thank you,
so
man.
much for sharing your story and some of the
Awesome.
struggles you went through. And I can't wait to see you again. I don't know when I'll be back there
Absolutely.
again, but I'll be down there. And really quick, I just
Yep.
want to mention to the listeners that Jimmy is the cornhole champion. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't lost the game in 2.5 months. So we got, if you're out there and you're coming to treatment and you got a good cornhole game, I could get some better competition. Nah, I actually had one guy one time that was down there that every time I played him, he destroyed me. So, as much as the
Well, it
real,
wasn't when
the
I was there
real,
because
yeah,
you were beating everybody down there.
yeah. This one guy, Michael C, who was one of the clients down there. He used to play in a club and this and that. So
Oh, there you go.
I played him about 30 times and he beat me 29-30. In the one game I won, I made like an airmail to beat him 21-19 on the last bag that I threw. And it was the one game that I won against him. So I'm pretty good, but there have been 4 or 5 guys that came in and cleaned my
Yeah.
clock down there too. So, but
Jimmy Keefe,
it's good times.
thank you so much, brother,
All
for
right.
being on the show, man. God bless you.
Absolutely.
And
Thank
I will
you.
talk with you soon, brother.
All right, my man. Good seeing you, Pat.
Good
I'll
just seeing
talk
you.
to you soon.
Bye.
Be good. All right, bye now.